Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the second of our three-part series on VMware's Tanzu platform for DevSecOps enablement. I'm Eddie Zapata. I'm a solution architect at Government CIO, and like you, I'm excited to see what our presenters will be sharing with us today. Before I introduce them, for the benefit of those in the audience who were not able to participate in our previous sessions, Government CIO is a longstanding partner of the Department of Veteran Affairs. And as a result of the VA announcing 7 new DevSecOps priorities for the agency in early December, we've invited subject matter experts from VMware to inform us on their leading edge platform, Tanzu. Today, we're pleased to be joined by Tom Collins and Dan Nemeth. Tom is a cloud architect, and Dan is a federal delivery lead. After the presentation, Tom and Dan have also agreed to participate in a short Q&A session with us. Tom, Dan, thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Eddie. As Eddie said, my name is Dan Nemeth. I am a federal delivery lead within Tanzu Labs. My background is that I'm both a veteran and an engineer. I served in the Army from 89 to 93, did a couple of tours overseas, and since returning to the civilian world, I've been an engineer since. I joined Pivotal back in 2014 when Pivotal Cloud Foundry was in its infancy to help customers be successful in adopting a cloud platform. We quickly came to realize that we were leaving our customers with a production-grade cloud application runtime and little understanding of how to modernize their applications to run in the cloud. Myself, along with a handful of other app-minded architects, began to incubate and iterate on a set of competencies that resulted in a very successful business unit in Pivotal known as application transformation. Our focus was to apply lean, agile, and domain-driven design practices to help our customers embark on their cloud journey to gain measurable and incremental gains very quickly. In 2020, Pivotal was acquired by VMware. Pivotal Cloud Foundry is now a part of VMware's Tanzu platform, and in VMware, our product development arm, formerly known as Pivotal Labs, along with our app transformation team, data, and platform teams, have come together to comprise the VMware Tanzu Labs. I lead the federal engineering organization within Tanzu Labs.
And good morning. My name is Tom Collins. I am a cloud architect with VMware Tanzu Labs, and I've been working with this application transformation team since the early days, helping to refine, develop, just simply make better our practices, our standards, our procedures, ways of adding value to the customer and making it so they can take their applications, modernize them, and run them on a modern cloud platform.
I would suggest that if you've been in business for more than a few years, your portfolio begins to feel like this. It's a web of interconnected complexity. Commercial off-the-shelf packages to monolithic applications built using .NET or legacy Java frameworks. Maybe you standardize on ESB technologies to communicate across systems with older backends like mainframe or AS400. And chances are, for newer initiatives, you started working with cloud-native tech like microservices, containers, and event-driven patterns. You want to leverage cloud and increase value delivered, but feel held back by years of complexity. Next slide. Does any of this sound familiar? The reality is universal in our experience. You're under pressure to deliver new and better features faster than ever before, but everything you do is tied into existing complex systems. Going faster seems impossible. Even if you could go faster, your release processes operate on a fixed schedule. These policies exist for safety and security, but tend to hold back innovation. And like most organizations, you've been on this journey for years, but costs aren't really going down. Your developer experience isn't improving. When does all this begin to happen? Next slide. Modernizing for the cloud isn't about changing where it runs, but how it runs. And there's no silver bullet. Modernization is about buying down technical debt. A cloud platform solves a lot of your technical debt, but modernizing an application for cloud deployment makes it portable across a multitude of cloud providers. Further, modernization also removes complexity and makes it easier to go faster and respond to customer needs. The need to modernize for cloud has never been stronger, thanks to the relentless pace of digital transformation. But the concept of modernization certainly isn't new. This is a quick summary of the more traditional approaches to be careful about, like big upfront planning. Often, we'll see customers spend countless months on discovery, assessment, and strategy definition. They make a ton of assumptions and predictions with plans that may or may not prove true, and they won't really know until they're actually doing the work. So when you spend too much time planning versus doing, you're losing momentum and the necessary proof that only is gained when you have demonstrable wins. Most of the time, when we modernize core systems, we focus and prioritize symptoms and avoid root cause concerns. These often appear like horizontal solutions. For example, my system has latency, therefore it needs a cache, when data architecture is actually the underlying problem. When you address symptoms and miss out on the root cause, you tend to miss potential business impact, and problems appear again later and often worse. The path to cloud for many customers is focused on lift and shift of workload from on-prem to VM and containers. This is fine for many apps that just work, apps that aren't updated often or at all. You can drive IT operational cost reductions thanks to automated patching, day two processes, kinds of benefits that you can gain by adopting a cloud platform. But lift and shift, or what we call your mess for less, is usually insufficient to deliver the business outcomes you seek. And finally, we've seen customers treat modernization as a one-time project. We believe modernization is a competency with skill, organization, process improvements that evolve and mature over time. Modernization is necessary for business agility and digital transformation. You need to build this competency. And modernization leadership needs to develop within your own organization. Next. But we think it's worth the effort to modernize, and we have evidence to back that up. Modernized systems running on VMware Tanzu will deliver exponential time savings and efficiency gains across the software development lifecycle. Provisioning time is vastly reduced because most everything is self-service. Developers spend more time coding, delivering features and updates to your systems, and drastically less time configuring and troubleshooting environments. When you adopt a continuous delivery set of techniques and tooling, you release far more things more often and faster. And finally, production systems are much more efficient with fewer people supporting many more applications. To remain viable, you will need to embrace a cloud platform. We believe you should absolutely move existing systems to VMware Tanzu. Plan just enough to start, and start with something small but meaningful. Measurement and accountability are important. Define stretch goals, measure outcomes over output, and be sure to keep stakeholders involved and excited. Look to automate everything in the context of that one thing. Build new skills as you go and use real work to inform your strategy. In our experience, doing this allows you to work quickly through smaller increments of time, showing material progress, and most importantly, biasing toward real work versus getting bogged down in theory and planning. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Tom to talk a bit more in depth about our approach to modernization.
Thanks, Dan. So one of the things Dan mentioned on the last slide was finding the right thing to work on. And we believe that's very, very important. We look at this from a couple of axes. First, we look at the technical axis. Can it be moved to the cloud? Does it even make sense from a technical perspective to move this to the cloud? Are you running on a runtime that's not at all cloud friendly? Do you have proprietary tooling that's doing a lot of file-based actions? Do you have statefulness running in memory caches inside your application? All those things are not very cloud-friendly practices, so they take a lot of technical work to make them work. There's also business reasons to move them over to the cloud. There could be licensing costs. You could have some WebLogic licenses coming up in the next 6 months, and moving off of those would save the company a ton of money. There could be time to market factors. If you get it out there quickly, there could be giant revenue generations from this. There could be change frequency considerations to also think about. If this is something that changes all the time, rapid change from our development practices and the cloud friendliness of the application could make a huge difference to the business. So we take these technical and these business factors and put them in a funnel. We want to find the application that makes sense for the business to move and also makes a lot of technical sense to move. Then we also look at the organizational factors. It's a lot easier to move an application if there are domain experts around. If we want to figure out what an application is doing and how it's supposed to behave, the domain experts make that process a lot quicker. There could be calendar dependencies as well. For example, if it's the end of the year time when you have 90% of your use cases, that would be a bad time to move. But immediately following that, when almost no one is using the application, that makes a lot more sense. We combine all these things and try to find the right apps to move. So let's say you have a portfolio of a couple of hundred apps. It doesn't make sense for our engineers to come in and examine the code base application by application. It's not a scalable process. So we've built a tool called the Cloud Suitability Analyzer. It does a static analysis of all your code base using configurable rules written in YAML. And these rules can be based on a myriad of technologies, .NET, Java, Python, even PHP. And it looks at those code bases and says, these are cloud friendly. These are less cloud friendly. These are more cloud friendly. And it assigns a relative score to each of the applications that it finds and scans. The relative score is important. We can start with a 5 and say that's fairly decent to move. 8 would be harder. 2 would be easier. And the reason we do a relative scale is that because the technical feasibility of an app is not the only factor in moving the application to the cloud. Ignoring the business side for a minute, having the domain experts is a technical reason. We need to know how the app is supposed to behave. If there's automation already in place, that makes it easier. If it's not in place, it makes it a lot harder. A lot of factors, this just determines one of them. Another one of the tools we've been developing over the past few years is a cookbook. Cookbook is full of recipes. We've been doing this for a lot of years. We've got a lot of recipes on the best way to move things over to the cloud. As we recognize these things and write them down, this is all managed through a GitHub repository. We just push our commit up to the GitHub repo, and then we've got CI/CD pipelines that take this repository, take this code base, and then push it using Hugo as a static content server, so that anybody can look at the contents of this cookbook at any time. This is one of the tools we bring to our clients when we go in there, and then we can share our knowledge and what we've learned over the years. So how is it we do this? Well, if the first ask is that we want to modernize the portfolio, our first switch point is, do we move a portfolio of applications? Do you have a couple of hundred applications to move? Or do you just want to modernize a giant monolithic app that's causing your business all sorts of pain? Let's take, for example, that you're moving a portfolio. First thing we do is we assess the portfolio. We do the things we talked about. We come and work with you over a 2 to 4 week period, and we find the right business factors that matter to your organization. We find the right organization factors that matter. We do a technical scan on all your applications. We put all these in a funnel, and what we come up with is a plan, a prioritized group of apps, the ones that make the most sense to tackle early on and the ones we could probably leave where they are, and work our way through that plan. The engagement where we start that work is called an app transformation engagement for replatforming focus. Here we want to replatform these apps efficiently and prepare to scale. For these, we go from anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks. We pair with your engineers. We pair with your automation people when it comes to delivering these things, setting up the automation in the CI/CD pipelines. Pairing with the folks, we also include our test-driven development philosophies and other XP practices. We work side by side and we find the right apps and train people just in time on how to do these processes. If, for example, you've got a monolithic app as a part of this portfolio, we apply the same processes that we would if it's just a giant monolithic app. We need to learn how to modernize this application. We need to know how to break down this giant ball of spaghetti into several small microservices and other domains. That application, that engagement is known as an application modernization navigator. We use some old school things here. We do an event storm. We take a yellow stickies and put all the business events up on a whiteboard and try to figure out where they're all grouped to find the domains. We invite business people to this. We invite engineers to this. We invite the architects to this. We invite the testers to this. We invite end users to this. What we discover often is that the business people have a very different idea of how an application is supposed to work than the developers who's actually coded it. We find they're speaking different languages at the same time, trying to describe the same concept. By bringing all these different diverse groups together into the same room and us being there, we can come onto a shared understanding of the behavior, the desired behavior of the application. And then we also have a shared vocabulary that makes the future modernization a lot easier to accomplish. Once we've done this event storming exercise, the domain boundaries generally fall out from this. And based on other business priorities, we can discover the first domain that makes the most sense to strangle out of the monolith. Once we've got that domain, We actually get in and start doing the work. That's another app transformation engagement. We send another team, 4 to 6 engineers, 6 to 12 weeks. We sit with you, we pair with you, we do the test-driven development, we do the automation. And in this case, we take the domain, strangle it out of the monolith, build what's called an anti-corruption layer inside the monolith so that traffic can be shifted either to the new microservice implementation or remain in the monolith itself. And it's not a one-to-one thing. It's usually a dial where we can have 10% of the traffic going over here or 40% of the traffic going over here. That gives us information of how the application is behaving in real time. That information, that real runtime information, is super informative because that feeds back into how we approach the next domain. We use that real-time information based on these fast feedback cycles to inform our work. Next, we want to scale this out. If you've got 250 applications, one team of 4 engineers working at these one at a time is going to take a very long time to finish. Same if you've got a large monolith with 40 or 50 domains embedded within it. You need to have the ability to scale this out. You need to have several teams working in parallel. And we can help you with that too. We can provide a lot of guidance, a lot of overall management on getting this scaling out so you can accomplish more with more teams working in parallel. So let's talk a little bit about scaling and what that means. We found that successful scaling programs have these 4 components. First off, you have to have a program level governance onto what's going on. You can't have 20 cowboy teams, each working independently, going in 20 different directions, each of them solving problems in their own specific way. When there's a general solution available, when there's a great way to do it, when there's great practices and patterns, we need to make sure they're being used across the scale. Also, if we find that there are gaps, makes sense for one team to build something but not another team, or it makes sense for neither of these teams to build it, we apply that program level management to say, no, this is where this needs to happen. These are the groups that are responsible for doing this. Second, we want to do skills enablement. And this is a point Dan touched on a little while before. This isn't just a one-time project. This is a practice you need to build. We need to be able to retrain and enable these skills and share these skills and make sure this is a culture of learning about how to do this cloud level enablement, cloud level development. And we want to make sure that this is enabled as part of your culture of your organization. Third, the tools and techniques. Automation. That's a theme we keep coming back to. Automating all the things. If you find yourself doing something manually more than once, that's probably a great candidate for a script. We should automate these things because then they're done consistently and they're done reliably. And your engineers can focus more on delivering new business features as opposed to chasing down what went wrong with the last deploy. Lastly, the execution part. Again, with the automated SDLC, but we also use the test-driven development, which is a big factor in making sure that we have automated test coverage of the business cases we've developed. Plus, our regular practices, our XP or lean practices, accelerate velocity for your team, for your scale of teams, and then make sure all the 20 teams, all your scale teams are working together in one direction to deliver value to your enterprise. So here's where we can help you out. We've got 3 main columns here. The first is going faster. One of the things we do when we come on site is discover quickly what matters. We find the app that matters a lot and we have a bias for action. And we want to get in there and we want to find out how that's working, start working on that, validate the assumptions we made, and then feedback the results from that into the next experiment we have to run. We automated the cloud suitability determination. Looking at all those suites of apps, we get the same relative score for all of them. It gives us more information on the best things to tackle. We use open source technology from VMware. VMware is the steward of SteelToe, a .NET library, and also of Spring Boot, which is the ubiquitous Java framework used all over the cloud. If we look at the second column, we realize the iterative results. The first thing is very important. We try to find quantitative metrics against which to measure ourselves. Qualitative metrics are good. Quantitative metrics are much, much better. If you've got hard numbers to describe how well you're doing, then you can go to those numbers and deliberately demonstrate your success. These kind of approaches enable us to move apps in a matter of days and sometimes even hours. And by doing this fast feedback system, starting with something small and then building on the results that we learn, we get a lot of good results, and that enables us just to go faster, calling back to that first column again. We develop these new skills while doing the work. We work with your team. We're showing them to do it by doing it with them. We don't want to just give them a fish. We want to teach them how to fish themselves so that when we walk out the door, they're comfortable carrying on with the patterns we've been developing. Lastly, we're outcome oriented. We can deliver these new features, patches, updates a lot quicker, a lot more accurately. If you got something like a heartbeat bug affecting hundreds of your applications, doing that manually without an automation thing could take months. With the automation, it's a matter of hours to get that bug fix out there. This lowers your cost of your maintenance. This shortens your QA cycle. You get the scalability and all the other abilities from your cloud platform because you've automated these things and you've built cloud native applications. You can support thousands of apps with just a handful of operators. Things go faster, things go better, things go more reliably. So we've had some recent customer successes. I'm going to brag about this a little bit, and I'm not going to read this slide to you, but across the entire spectrum, from just planning on what to do to scaling out across the entire enterprise, we've got plenty of customers that are happy with what we've been delivering. And as you can see, they're across a wide range of industries, everywhere from banking on one side to insurance to government customers. We've got airlines, what do we got? Cars, sporting goods, all sorts of industries, all across the board, and we're helping them all out. So Dan's going to talk a little bit about what it takes to get started.
Thanks, Tom. So the good news is getting started is actually easy. We'd love to talk some more. We'd love to better understand your goals, pains, your priorities, and so forth. And we can share more about our approaches and experiences. If we wanted to really dig in, we would start with a discovery workshop. It's a facilitated session running from a couple of hours to a full day. Here we'll dig deeper into your system, identify where to start and how to measure, and do some planning around future state architecture. The work is intended to be useful for your strategy and helps inform a proposal, provided you're interested in working with us. From there, we'd love to engage on an initial project. Typically, they run from a few weeks to a few months. We work remotely or in person using our lean agile approaches to quickly deliver measured outcomes that inform ongoing strategy and fast ROI. Next. So, as Eddie pointed out, we are VMware Tanzu Labs. Tom and I are practitioners within that organization. We pair with you to ship great products together. We have two responsibilities: ship great products and teach modern development practices so you can continue to ship great products without us. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys. That was a lot of great information. A lot for me to, digest and process. That was awesome. So we're going to go straight into some questions. This first one is a two-part question here. What makes an application cloud native? And in the same vein, what are some of the things that an application might have that would make it harder to move to a platform?
I'll go ahead and field that one. I'll refer the asker of that question to 12factor.net. It's a website that came out quite a few years ago. It's a pretty quick read, and it talks about the things that a cloud native application contains. Some of the more obvious ones are statefulness. You want to remove state from the application itself. File access is another one that's pretty common. Getting your configuration from the environment as opposed to hard coding it in the application, that's another big one. There was a book that came out not too long ago, written by a colleague of ours, Kevin Hoffman, Beyond the 12-Factor App, where he talks about also building in things like observability and security as first-class citizens in your application. When you tend to tack those on at the end, it becomes a solution that's less cloud-friendly. But yeah, bottom line, the 12factor.net is a great resource for that. I advise folks to go check that out.
Great, thanks, Tom. Hey, I do want to remind everyone out there that if you have questions, please send them in. I know Dan and Tom are ready to field some tough ones for you if you have them. Another question that I have here for you is, what have you experienced as the biggest obstacle or obstacles to successfully executing an application modernization effort?
Yeah, I don't know, Tom, if you want to tackle some of this. My first thought is application modernization as an event, like as a technical event, is actually fairly straightforward, right? I mean, there are certain things that Tom just alluded to that work well in a cloud disposition, and then there are others that do not. And so making an application cloud suitable is really about paying down that debt that doesn't play well in the cloud. But that's just a point in time solution, and it was one of the symptoms of a bad modernization plan that I pointed out earlier in the presentation. So a strong modernization effort is really centered on embracing change, recognizing that your existing conventional wisdom has led to your current conventions, and your current conventions may be not up to the task of being able to meet the market where it needs you to be, right? Being fast, being resilient, being reactive to change. And so the biggest obstacle is really making sure that we are working with those who are embracing that culture of change, and we have change agents within our customers to really help kind of draw down on some of the organizational debt that may be existent there. Anything to add, Tom?
Yeah, the short answer for that's a cultural change, right? It's not just putting out the new technology, it's expecting the culture to change. It's getting people used to writing tests first. It's getting folks to trust the results of those automated tests to say that this is a quality application. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And that's not a ship that turns on a dime. That takes a little bit of time to get used to and get comfortable with these new techniques. But once you embrace them, the results are incredible.
It's probably worth calling out too that embracing a cloud platform, whether it's Tanzu or something else, something that supports a fully automated SDLC, something that allows you to have programmatic interface to your networking, to running your applications, to managing them. It's really fundamental to unlocking some of the speeds and efficiencies that you get from being in a cloud disposition. The platform matters.
Absolutely. Yeah, the self-provisioning you get, like with Taz especially, that saves so much time. The ability for a developer to see how this works and self-provision their own development resources makes a huge difference, because if they can't, and there's a business process that takes weeks for them to figure out, they're going to overload something. They're going to add technical debt to solve a problem.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, guys. We actually had another one come in that's kind of related to that. I think you did answer some of this, but as a potential customer, what can I do to increase the likelihood of successful modernization?
Yeah. So if you are a customer considering a journey towards the cloud and modernizing your existing applications, the first thing that you need to do is embrace change in your culture, change in your practices. You need to suspend disbelief, sufficient to build the evidence necessary to help justify the change that you're advocating. So it requires strong leadership. It requires a change agent within the organization, somebody who's willing to challenge and knock down organizational barriers. And that's fundamental. If we're looking at this as an IT exercise only, and we're going to go back to our existing practices, you're going to end up with applications that exhibit less product debt, but that's only going to return over time as you return to practices that may not support operations in the cloud.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I got to tell you, so as someone who I have extensive background in enterprise architecture, specifically organizational change management as well, and I think too often customers expect the tool to just come in and solve all their problems, and they don't realize some of the pre-planning that has to occur in order for that tool to be successful once it's implemented. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, some of the customers that we work with have shared stories where, and we've experienced ourselves as we were learning and building these competencies, that you start out and you make assumptions, and then you go down a path, and then you find that you've arrived at a point and your assumptions were wrong. And so by adopting lean and agile practices, what you're doing is you're shortening those feedback cycles and you're validating your assumptions sooner because time without validation is risk. And we've had customers who have spent better part of a year or more working on applications, thinking that they're building a great microservices implementation, only to find out that the way that they approached it created an insurmountable amount of like security concerns that they would have to remediate, and they ended up abandoning the effort, realizing that like they didn't take an evidence-based approach where you're building on incremental gains, right? When we work on these modernization journeys, one of the most important aspects is to make sure that the work that we do can result in a production environment. Right? We find that work that doesn't end up in a production environment only ends up yielding greater operational overhead for the organization that's doing the work, right? You have additional branches of code, you have increased operational concerns. And then what happens is your regular business takes precedence over that new novel work that you're trying to do. So when we engage with our customers, what we like to do is identify one thing, make it measurable, make it achievable, and get it all the way through to prod. And that establishes a beachhead, if you will, of evidence and capability that we can then continue to iterate on and evolve. The good news is even if that effort ended with only that one bit of work landing in prod, we've actually solved real problems. We've paid down real organizational debt, and they're able to maintain it in a production environment. So it's the opposite of like let's do a large study, let's spend months figuring out like all the different things that we need to do. Let's build a detailed plan that with dependencies and critical path. What we like to do is figure out what are the pains that you experience in an organization. Let's prioritize those pains. Like, what is the cost of those pains? Is it pain to the user? Is it pain to your revenue stream? Really look at all the different ways that you can consider a problem, and then use that as the first like pass of prioritization, and then solve for that complexity, solve for that pain. And then by doing that, you're actually delivering new capabilities, you're delivering better mission outcomes, you're solving real problems, you're freeing up your team to be able to maybe address other pains. So that tends to be like the heart of our approach is solve pain, make sure that what we do is well scoped, that it's a good starting point, that it's a starting point that can be expounded upon if success is achieved, and then measure it constantly. And then if things are wrong, change course. If our assumptions are wrong, form new assumptions, go back to the evidence that we've been building and start over. It's really the heart of lean, and it's the heart of our processes on how we try to solve these big, really ugly problems that exist within our customers and try to get to measured outcomes very quickly.
Oh, that's great, Dan. Thanks. I mean, that's the big picture, right? And that's what's going to get you there. So that's awesome. Appreciate it. All right, got another one here for you. Is there any risk of vendor lock-in when we work with Tanzu services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, typically you're working with Tanzu services because you have an interest or are making an investment in Tanzu, and that's typically why we get involved. But the reality is the work that we're doing is about making an application more cloud native, right? I keep talking about buying down product debt. What you're doing is you're simplifying your application. You're simplifying the way it's configured, the way the bits run, the way that it gets scheduled. And ultimately, all of this work results in that asset becoming more portable, right? So it runs well in a cloud environment. And when we say cloud, we're not really talking about a location. We're talking about an externally scheduled containerized environment, container runtime, right? Something like the Tanzu offers, or Platform One, or vanilla Kubernetes, or name your platform provider. So the work that we do makes your application more portable. And if it can run in an externally scheduled containerized environment, AKA cloud, then it can run on bare metal. It can run in a VM. It can run in containers, whether they're on-prem or they're hosted or in some hybrid disposition, right? So it's working with our services organization to reason about the problems that you have, in your application portfolio is actually the opposite of vendor lock-in. It's giving you the flexibility to run your workloads where they need to be run.
Awesome, thanks. All right, let's go to the next one here. Given the, this is a great one. Thank you, COVID-19. Given the current remote work situation, how does VMware Tanzu execute on pair programming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I brought up the pair programming aspect a few times when I was doing my bit. So one of the concepts that we've always had is that we come to you and we work with you on your site. And traditionally in the pre-COVID days, that meant we come to your site and we sat right next to your developers as we were coding, and we sat right next to your program managers and taught them how to write stories, and we taught them how to organize and build the priority lists and things like that. And we sat right next to them when all that was happening. Obviously, in these COVID days, that's not a reality. So we've embraced a lot of new remote coding practices, a lot of screen share time, a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of that kind of stuff that you see all over the place. But when I say that we come to you, that's the truth. A lot of times, especially with these large enterprises, they have enterprise-wide tools. The approved tool is Skype here. The approved tool is WebEx over here. You're not allowed to use Zoom over here. Not allowed to use Tuple over here. So we work with your tool set and we work with your capabilities, and we find a way to share code and share the same screen as we're working together. We try to make sure things are very collaborative, recognizing that not being able to shout over a desk and ask somebody a question when you're remote is a real problem, so that we have our open Slack channels or open Teams channels that we can talk on. Again, we do it with the customer's tool set and make sure that we're talking and we're meeting regularly and we're discussing it and sharing these contexts and still doing our remote pairing, working together to get the shared context of how something was built, the decisions that were being made, and making sure that we still get that experience even though it's a remote concept.
You know, to add to that, we're talking about pair programming, and we often gloss over this, we take it for granted, but I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, earlier in the presentation, Tom alluded to the fact that when we find a pattern, we write it down and we put it in a cookbook, and we build these for our customers. We have an open source one that's available on our website, right? So you can go and see like what we've encountered and how we've approached it. But ultimately, that's just one form of knowledge transfer that occurs when we're involved in an engagement with the customer. And pairing is really the biggest enablement accelerator that we have when working with the customer. We stated our goal isn't to modernize all your software and run it for you, right? In fact, our goal is the opposite. Our goal is, we'd love to run it for you on VMware Tanzu. That's great. That's really our business. As a services organization, our goal is to help you learn how to do this work so that you can continue to deliver great software with us out of the room. And pairing is the most effective way that we found to do this. When one of our engineers pairs with a customer engineer, we bring a lot of context. We bring a lot of domain expertise around cloud native, domain-driven design principles, Spring Framework, or name your tech stack, how to reason about problems running in a containerized environment, Kubernetes, TAS. Like, this is what we bring. And our client engineer pair should know the system, should know the problem domain, should understand some of the history of the application, why it is the way it is, what the users need and do. And by coming together, pairing and reasoning about problems by discussing them, talking about them, the two halves of that pair produce a ton of tacit knowledge transfer, right? Like we're passing knowledge on how we reason about problems and how to think about the cloud. You're helping us ramp up on your problem domain. You're helping us ramp up on your application, understand decisions that were made, understand a lot of things better. And that union of expertise is really what enables us to be more effective as consultants working with you to solve the objectives that we lay out at the beginning of our engagements. But the inverse is even more important and true, which is when we're done pairing with a team, that team we consider enabled, right? And that team should be able to continue operations, working towards the cloud, modernizing applications on their own. And we found that like for large enterprises that we've worked with, where there is actually a very large engineering core, that enablement proliferates almost like in a mitosis way, where like if that enabled team pairs with another set of engineers, they become enabled. They start to reason about problems differently. They start to learn how to address the cloud. And this has been a very effective way for us to kind of seed that transformation of mindset on how to think about applications, how to architect the applications so that they run well in a cloud disposition, and then have it proliferate. So just want to call that out. It's probably the secret sauce to any of our engagements.
That's awesome, because I'll tell you, COVID-19 has had its obviously its positives and its negatives. It's definitely I think push for more innovation, more creativity, and so it's great that all that is being accounted for. So guys, look, it looks like we've run out of time here. Actually, we've run out of questions. We haven't run out of time. We got plenty of time, but looks like folks are trying to process all this information. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Again, a lot of great content. Your tool the platform sounds amazing. Looking forward to, I think we're going to be establishing a partnership with you guys, and I'm looking forward to working with you, definitely. For all you DevSecOps and enthusiasts, thank you for joining us, and do remember to register for the upcoming, the last session that we have going on, and that will be next week, I believe on March 5th. Dan, Tom, thank you again. It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure.